A chilling mystery unfolds in the dark corners of West 35th Street, where a single clue can upend everything. Step inside the world of danger, deceit, and razor-sharp detective work. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe and the knife, left in Fritz's kitchen. The first thing that struck me, even before the shine of the steel hit my eyes, was the silence. The brownstone at 6:15 a.m. usually had the personality of a monastery at dawn, quiet, orderly, and smelling faintly of Fritz's early morning yeast experiments. But that morning, when I stepped into the kitchen after following a faint sound that might have been Fritz's shoe scraping the tile, the air felt wrong. Not dangerous wrong, but violated wrong, like somebody had tracked mud across a cathedral aisle. Fritz stood frozen beside the butcher block, and that was the second wrong thing. Fritz Brenner at rest anywhere near workspace was a contradiction of nature. He's the kind of man who can dice chives with monastic reverence while telling you about the proper temperature for calf's liver, and he treats his equipment with the tenderness of a priest handling relics, which is why the third wrong thing was the loudest. The carving knife, not Fritz's, longer, slimmer, a foreigner among natives. And the crimson smear along the blade didn't come from any animal that belonged in our refrigerator. If there's one thing you don't expect to see glittering on Fritz Brenner's spotless butcher block at 6:15 in the morning, I said, it's a carving knife with someone else's blood on it. Fritz's face twitched. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the knife as if it might leap up and stab his reputation. Mr. Archie, when I rose, all was normal. His Swiss vowels trembled. Someone has touched my kitchen. I moved closer. The blood had dried to a dark sheen. Fresh within a few hours, I estimated. The handle bore an engraving, EC. The letters curled like the monogram on a menu at a pretentious restaurant where the waiter calls water a pairing element. I wasn't a stranger to Manhattan's culinary aristocracy. You can't escort certain types around town without absorbing names of the clubs that think salt and pepper qualify as common affair. But even I couldn't place this monogram exactly. "Don't touch it," Fritz snapped. It was the first time in 8 years he had ever raised his voice at me. "All right, pal," I said, backing off. "But if you think I planted that there to spice up your morning, you can check my pockets." He shook his head violently. "This is an insult, a desecration." The word wasn't misplaced. The kitchen was his sanctuary. Gleaming tile, polished steel, and counters so clean you could perform surgery on them. Someone had slipped in during the night, left a bloody knife, and vanished without Fritz hearing. That meant skill, or stealth, or very bad intentions. Before I could continue my inspection, I heard a soft but firm tap of leather on tile. Wolfe never entered the kitchen. He barely tolerated looking at it. But he stepped just far enough into the doorway to be framed by it, like a part of the architecture that had changed its mind about staying still. "What," he demanded, "is that?" He said that the same way he might say cockroach or infernal nuisance. Wolfe can put more distaste into a single syllable than most men compress into a paragraph. "A present," I said, though the wrapping is a bit unconventional. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Archie." "Don't look at me. It wasn't on my wish list." Fritz swallowed. "Mr. Wolfe, sir, I have never, I assure you, this is—" Wolfe lifted a hand. "Not soothing, not gentle, but firm. I do not assign you blame, Fritz. If someone has violated this room—" His jaw tightened. "Wolfe takes violations of his household as personally as threats to an orchid bloom. Archie, secure the office. You will not contaminate that object." I wasn't planning to butter my toast with it, I said, but he wasn't listening. He studied the knife as though trying to divine its past crimes by sheer mental force. "Blood." "Fresh," I supplied. "Not too long ago." "And," Wolfe gestured, "and not from a chicken." He exhaled slowly. "Not fear, not surprise. Calculation. Call Inspector Kramer immediately." "That early?" I asked. "He may still be wrestling with his morning cigar." "Archie." He didn't bark. He rarely does. But the tone could have cut rope. I headed for the office, reached the desk, and yanked the phone toward me. If timing is the thief of joy, it's also the herald of trouble, so I dialed Kramer before trouble had a chance to get bored. He picked up on the second ring. "Homicide, Kramer." "Nero Wolfe's office," I said. "Archie Goodwin speaking. I've got a problem in our kitchen that's bleeding on the butcher block. Goodwin, Kramer growled. What kind of problem? Carving knife, not Fritz's. Long, slim, and wearing what looks very much like fresh human blood. Planted on his spotless block at 6:15 a.m. sharp. There was a pause, followed by the sound of a man biting down on his temper. Describe the knife. I did. Length, shape, balance, and the neat little engraving on the handle. Initials EC, I finished. Curly as a society lady's signature. Another pause. When Kramer spoke again, his voice had dropped half an octave. That matches a knife missing from a homicide I'm standing over right now. Louis Marquette, maitre d' at the Epicurean Circle, killed behind their loading entrance sometime last night. You're kidding, I said. Our decor really is homicidal. I'm not in the mood, Goodwin. You're telling me the weapon from my fresh corpse is sitting in Wolfe's kitchen? I'm telling you we just found a bloody knife that fits your description, I said. Fritz nearly fainted into the yeast. Don't touch it, Kramer snapped. We're coming over with a crew. Nobody goes near that butcher block until we get there. I closed my eyes briefly. I don't require psychic abilities to predict how Wolfe would take being tied to a culinary homicide involving a prestigious dining club. Inspector, I said, we discovered the knife just now. Fritz practically had a coronary. I want Wolfe, Kramer said. Now. I tilted the receiver toward the doorway. Wolfe didn't move from his office chair, but he extended a hand. I passed the receiver to him. Inspector, Wolfe said, you astonish me. Kramer didn't rise to the bait. Spare it. I want to know how that knife got into your kitchen. If I possessed that information, Wolfe said coolly, I would not withhold it. A murder weapon has been planted in my house. That is intolerable. Planted, Kramer repeated. And you expect me to take your word? Wolfe's nostrils flared. Inspector, I employ Mr. Goodwin, not Mr. Houdini. If a man could enter this house undetected and place a knife on Fritz's table, then the city is in worse condition than I thought. I muttered, thanks ever so much, but Wolfe ignored me. Kramer grunted. We're on our way. No, Wolfe said sharply. I forbid any detectives to contaminate my kitchen until your forensic men are prepared. You will treat that room with respect. You don't give orders to the NYPD. Wolfe inhaled once deeply. Inspector, there is blood on the blade, yes? You require it preserved, so do I. Your haste may cost both of us. A long pause. Then Kramer said, We'll be there with a proper crew. He hung up. Wolfe exhaled. This is a violation, he said. That makes two of us, I replied, but I'm guessing Fritz counts triple on emotional grounds. Wolfe's eyes softened by a millimeter. Fritz is distressed. Distressed is one word, I said. Another is furious enough to turn a souffle inside out. Wolfe rang the bell for Fritz, who appeared instantly in the office doorway. His face had regained some colour, but his hands were clasped in front of him as if he were attending confession. Fritz, Wolfe said, you will not attempt to clean the kitchen. Leave all as it stands. Yes, sir. You have done nothing to merit reproach. That was Wolfe's equivalent of a warm hug. Fritz bowed his head and retreated. I crossed to my desk and flipped open the notebook I use when the world starts tossing curveballs. So, what's the plan, besides waiting for Kramer to track blood across the rug? You will document everything precisely, Wolfe said. Every item out of place, every sound Fritz may have heard. And you will refrain from levity until the matter is clearer. Refrain? I asked. That's against my religion. Archie, his tone again. Fine, I said. I'll be as solemn as a banker at inventory time. Wolfe leaned back, steepling his fingers. His forehead creased as though the universe had personally offended him by disturbing his morning routine. The monogram, he said. EC, I supplied. Any bells? None. But you will investigate. After Kramer's boys go home, or do you want me sneaking out while they're collecting samples? He sniffed. Kramer will not permit you to contaminate his crime scene. Then I'll wait. The doorbell rang at 6:52 a.m., which officially makes it the earliest Kramer has ever darkened our doorstep. I met him at the door. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. There's a difference. Angry Kramer juts his jaw. Tired Kramer keeps it locked. He brushed past me with a grunt. Where? I led him to the kitchen. Fritz stood just outside, hands folded. Wolfe remained in the doorway like a boulder that had sprouted an opinion. Kramer inspected the knife without touching it. That's the weapon, all right. And we didn't invite it, I said. Anyone slip in through a time portal? Goodwin, he growled warningly, but not with malice. He stepped back and signaled to his technicians, treat the whole room as compromised. Wolfe rumbled, do not damage anything. I will not tolerate maltreatment. Kramer shot him a look. We're doing our jobs. As am I, Wolfe replied. For a moment, the two men simply stood there, two bulls in the same cramped intellectual pasture. Then Kramer exhaled. We'll handle this cleanly. There it was, respect, grudging, and honest. When they began their work, I left them to it. Wolfe retreated to the office, eyelids half lowered in brewing fury. Fritz hovered near the dining room like a ghost afraid to haunt his own house. I stood beside the counter, taking one last look at the monogrammed handle gleaming under the kitchen lamps. Someone had staged this. Someone with knowledge, access, and malice. And I knew, as sure as I know Wolfe dislikes interruptions during orchid hours, that our breakfast plans were officially wrecked. By the time Kramer tramped into the office from the kitchen, he wasn't angry. He was something worse. The man looked like he'd jogged through a crime scene and then swallowed half the evidence for breakfast. His jaw was set tight enough to crack walnuts. Goodwin, he grunted, giving me about as much courtesy as a city bus changing lanes in traffic as he headed for the red chair. That's me, I said, though most guests say hello first. Where is Wolfe? Where he always is at this godforsaken hour, in the office wishing he wasn't awake. Kramer didn't bother replying. He pushed farther into the room like he expected to be met with fireworks, or at least a corpse propped up for morning tea. What he found instead was Wolfe in his oversized chair, looking like someone had interrupted a sacred ritual, which in his view they had. Wolfe doesn't acknowledge mornings until they've earned it. Wolfe did not rise. Inspector. A single word, cool enough to frost glass. Kramer planted himself in front of Wolfe's desk and took out a cigar. He didn't light it. He just rolled it between his fingers as if testing whether the universe deserved smoke yet. Let's skip the dance, he said. A maitre d' named Louis Marquette was stabbed last night behind the loading entrance of the Epicurean Circle. Fancy place. High-end pallet crowd. The knife we found in your kitchen, covered in his blood, matches the murder weapon. Wolfe's lips tightened, a movement microscopic and seismic all at once. Ridiculous. Ridiculous, Kramer echoed. Sure, that's one word. Here's another. Procedure. He jabbed the cigar at the air. The weapon was found on your property. That means your household is on the table whether I like it or not. My household, Wolfe said coldly, did not commit this murder. I leaned against a filing cabinet. Inspector, are you suggesting Fritz tiptoed downstairs, stabbed a maitre d', dropped the knife in his own kitchen, and then serenely began prepping breakfast? Because if so, I recommend you invest in a more plausible suspect. Kramer shot me a look shaped like a tire iron. I'm not accusing Fritz, but the optics stink. His eyes flicked to Wolfe. You know that. Wolfe inhaled slowly. State the circumstances. Kramer rubbed a hand across his forehead. Marquette closed the dining rooms at 11, last seen alive around midnight by the sous chef. His body was found at 3 this morning by a delivery man. One stab wound, clean, quick, professional. The knife came from the Circle's own carving set, a monogrammed one. E.C., he paused. The same knife your man Goodwin found on your butcher block. Correction, I said. Fritz found it. I arrived for the show. Kramer grunted. Fritz says he didn't put it there. If Fritz Brenner says he didn't put something in his kitchen, Wolfe said, then he didn't. His integrity is unimpeachable. Kramer didn't argue. That's one thing about the man. He knows who's worth doubting and who isn't. I'm not looking to book Fritz, he said, but facts are facts. Someone brought that knife into your home. Someone with access. A red herring wandered by, wearing the shape of an insinuation. Maybe, I said. Marquette came here for a snack and cut himself shaving. Kramer gave me half a snort. I'm in no mood, Goodwin. Wolfe leaned forward a fraction. Inspector, you know as well as I do that the idea of Fritz committing homicide is beyond absurd. Therefore, someone entered my kitchen without permission. That is a violation, and a deliberate attempt to entangle me in this crime. Kramer's eyebrow twitched. You think you were framed. It is evident, Wolfe said. It's a possibility, Kramer conceded. The cigar twirled again. But until we have proof, everyone in this house stays under suspicion." "Phooey," Wolfe muttered. I stepped in before the PFUI could evolve into a full episode. "Look, Inspector, how about you tell us who this Marquette was, besides a dead man with fancy taste?" Kramer consulted his notebook. 41 years old, maitre d' at the Epicurean Circle for 6 years, not married, not especially liked, too many secrets, too many side deals. "Side deals?" Wolfe asked. Kramer hesitated. "This part stays off the record unless it pans out. Marquette had been sniffing around the Circle's supply chain. He told 2 staffers he was going to fix the books and end the racket. He didn't specify what racket." I whistled. Nothing like gourmet blackmail to season a murder. Kramer ignored me. "There's talk he had evidence of rationing fraud, illegal beef coming in through private suppliers, fancy cuts, no stamps, big money." The motif arrived right on time. Wartime scarcity, luxury profiteering, and high society greed served on silver. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Fraud is one matter. Murder is another. What is the NYPD's position?" "That's what I'm here to figure out." Kramer folded his notebook. "And I need cooperation. Full cooperation." Wolfe lifted one brow. "You shall have it, as long as you respect the boundaries of my home." That earned a grunt. Not agreement, but not dissent. I took my turn. "Inspector, may I offer a useful suggestion? Let me poke around the Epicurean Circle. I have a certain talent for stirring pots." Kramer shot me a measuring look. "I know, and sometimes you stir in cyanide." "Only when asked nicely." He sighed. "Wolfe, if I allow Goodwin to investigate, he stays within legal limits. No withholding evidence, no running interference. If he pulls any stunts, I'll have his hide." Wolfe's eyelids drooped. "Inspector, Archie is both competent and scrupulous. He will not obstruct justice." That was Wolfe defending me, politely, formally, and with enough weight to tip a scale. Kramer stared at Wolfe, then at me. "All right, Goodwin can look. But I'm assigning Stebbins to shadow the investigation. If you sneeze wrong, I'll hear about it." "Bless you in advance," I said. Kramer didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth flickered like it remembered how smiling worked once. "I'll expect updates," he said. "Real ones." "Of course," Wolfe said. Kramer glanced toward the hallway. "Your kitchen team is clear for now, but don't leave town." "We rarely leave the block," I assured him. With one last heavy look at Wolfe, less hostile than resigned, Kramer pocketed his cigar and headed out. No door slam, no fireworks, just fatigue. Honest, grim duty fatigue. When the door closed behind him, Wolfe groaned softly, like a man forced to endure the wrong cheese at lunch. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "You will prepare for your visit to this Epicurean Circle. I want every scrap of information regarding Marquette's duties, relationships, and disputes. I'll bring back a doggy bag." He ignored that. "Your tongue will remain tethered." "Tethered-ish," I said. "Inspector Kramer just allowed me to investigate. I'd like to honor the moment by not immediately ruining it." Wolfe flicked a finger. "You are not to antagonize the staff." "Me? I'm a lamb." "You are a wolfhound with delusions of charm." I grinned. Compliment accepted. He sighed. "Archie, exercise circumspection." That tone again, the one he swears isn't concern but always is. "You are talented at attracting peril." "You say the sweetest things," I replied. Wolfe pressed the bell cord, and Fritz appeared at the doorway as if conjured. "Breakfast will be delayed," Wolfe announced. Fritz nodded solemnly. "Understood, sir." "We require coffee," Wolfe added. "I will bring it." When Fritz left, Wolfe leaned back in his chair and shut his eyes, the very picture of a man attempting to negotiate with destiny and finding destiny a terrible conversationalist. "Archie," he said without opening his eyes, "fetch your notebook." "For planning?" I asked, taking a seat. "For war," he corrected. That was Wolfe's version of a suspense hook, and knowing the rate at which homicide travels through Manhattan's luxury dining circles, I didn't disagree. The Epicurean Circle looked like the kind of place where even the dust motes wore evening gloves. I stepped through the brass-framed entrance just past 11, and the first thing that hit me was the scent. Nutmeg, saffron, caramelizing onions, rolling out in waves warm enough to hypnotize a vegetarian. The second thing was the quiet. Not the peaceful kind you get in Wolfe's plant rooms, but the stiff, curated hush of a place that charges $10 a plate for appetizers during wartime. The maitre d' stand, freshly abandoned by the late Louis Marquette, sat like a throne missing its ruler. I gave it a nod on my way past, partly out of respect, partly to avoid the pair of waiters eyeing me as if I'd come to repossess the silverware. The dining hall itself was a stage, mahogany as polished as a politician's conscience, marble floors smooth enough to skate on, and chandeliers pretending electricity wasn't being rationed. The Epicurean circle was built for people who thought scarcity was something that happened to other people, a handy place for ration fraud if you wanted to bury illegal cuts under white linen tablecloths. A woman in a dark green suit approached, slim, tidy hair, face composed enough to survive a hurricane inspection. Sylvia Brandt, assistant manager. Her heels clicked sharp as punctuation marks. "You're Mr. Goodwin," she said. No question mark. "Guilty," I replied, "but don't let it distress you. I'm housebroken." She didn't smile, but something in her eyes softened. "The police telephoned that an associate of Mr. Wolfe might visit. If you'll follow me, I'll take you to my office." Sylvia's office was small but crisp. Orderly desk, framed notices, a faint perfume of mint and stress. I took the chair she indicated. "You worked closely with Marquette?" Her hands hesitated just long enough to mean something. "Yes." He was precise, demanding, difficult at times, but very capable. "And alive yesterday." She inhaled through her nose. "You don't need to remind me." "Sorry. Occupational hazard. Tell me, did he confide anything unusual recently?" Her gaze flicked to the door. Mr. Marquette was concerned about accounting discrepancies, shipment logs that didn't align. He believed someone was altering the ration stamp records. Bingo, the fraud trail, and a nice fat motive. Who had access to these logs? "Several people," she said. "Board members, the head chef, myself. But Marquette kept the originals locked in his ledger cabinet." "Where is this cabinet?" "In his office, but Mr. Greevy has sealed it until the board meets." "Convenient." She folded her hands to stop them trembling. "Mr. Goodwin, I don't want trouble. I respected Lewis, but this place is complicated. People have egos, alliances. If there was fraud, he wasn't the only one who knew." A nice, vague red herring, useful for atmosphere, but too polished to trust. "Thank you," I said, standing. "If you think of anything, call me." Her lips twitched. "Do you really think Mr. Wolfe will involve himself?" "I think someone dropped a bloody knife in Fritz Brenner's kitchen. Wolfe considers that a personal affront, which means yes, he'll involve himself." Her eyes widened an inch. "Then God help whoever is responsible." I tipped my hat and left her office to explore the battlefield. Henri Dumont was in the kitchen, positioned like a general in a fortress of gleaming copper pots. He was tall, sharp-featured, and had the kind of moustache that made you wonder if it had been trained in a military academy. He looked me over, decided I wasn't edible, and returned to berating a young cook about the moral failings of underseasoned bechamel. I waited until he finished reducing the poor man to vapour. "Henri Dumont?" He swung around. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's man." "That explains the shoes," he said, eyeing me like a suspicious soufflé. "Well, are you here to accuse me of murder?" "Not yet. I'm pacing myself." His snort echoed off the tile walls. Marquette was a tyrant, but I didn't kill him. His absence does not season the broth. "Sylvia Brandt says he was digging into supply chain fraud." Dumont's eyelid twitched. "The management's domain, not mine." "But you received the shipments." "I received vegetables, fish, meat. I did not review stamps." He leaned in until I could smell garlic and pride. "I am a chef, Mr. Goodwin, not a thief." "Someone used a circle carving knife to puncture your colleague," I said. "Any idea who had access to the set?" "Board members, senior staff. But Marquette was the guardian of the carving knives. He treated them like relics." His mouth tightened. "Perhaps that is why he died." Another red herring wrapped in ego. "Did you like him?" I asked. "I don't need to like a man to respect his palate. He had faults, but he was not incompetent." He jabbed a finger at me. "If you are sniffing around for scandal, I suggest you look at the board. They have more appetite for money than food." Who in particular? He considered. Franklin Greevy has the charm of a rotten turnip and twice the stench when squeezed. That's almost poetic. It is accurate. I thanked him and moved on before he could season me out of spite. Greevy, as it turned out, was waiting for me in the hallway outside Marquette's office. Mid-40s, immaculate suit, smile polished to a mirror shine. He offered his hand like a man presenting evidence of his innocence. "Ah, Mr. Goodwin, I've been told you're here on Wolfe's behalf. My condolences to his waistline." "Don't worry," I said. "It's holding steady, unlike your maitre d'." The smile clipped. "Yes, a tragedy. A terrible one. Louis was indispensable." "At what exactly?" "Coordination," he said vaguely. "He kept the circle functioning. And he also kept a ledger, locked up, full of shipment notes." His eyes sharpened. "The ledger is a board matter." "Then unlock it." He barked a soft laugh. "Mr. Goodwin, you may be accustomed to more improvisational methods, but we have protocols." "If charm were soup stock," I said, "you'd still be thin broth, Greevy." His jaw stiffened. "You won't be seeing the ledger today." "That's so." "That's so." A waiter approached, whispering something in his ear. Greevy straightened and gave me a final, dazzling smile. "I must attend to club matters. Good day." He departed with the airy confidence of a man who'd never been told no by anyone except his tailor. I jotted a few notes, Dumotte's arrogance, Sylvia's worry, Greevy's slipperiness, then explored Marquette's office. Locked cabinet, tidy shelves, a faint citrus smell from a bottle of polish. The ledger was inside the cabinet, no doubt, sitting there like a treasure chest no one wanted me touching. I considered picking the lock. Then I remembered Wolfe's strict rule, no evidence tampering, and Kramer's tight jawline. So I resisted, just barely. By the time I returned to West 35th Street, the afternoon light had gone honey gold. Wolfe was in the office, polishing a beer glass with a white napkin like a man contemplating the philosophical implications of its imperfections. He didn't need a polished glass. Fritz always chilled them pristine. It was a ritual, a way to tell the world he was displeased. "Report," he said. I sat, crossed my legs, and launched in. Sylvia's unease, Dumotte's pride, Greevy's thin broth, and the locked ledger taunting me from behind mahogany bars. Wolfe paused on the word ledger. "Describe the cabinet." I did. He frowned. "Greevy obstructed access." With a smile that should be taxed. "Phooey." He set the glass down and reached for the bell cord. Fritz appeared within seconds. "Yes, sir." "A beer," Wolfe said, "for Mr. Goodwin." I blinked. Afternoon beer was a rare honor. When Fritz left, Wolfe folded his hands. "Someone used food to mask crime." "And used Fritz's kitchen to season it," I offered. Wolfe cut me a glower sharp enough to peel garlic. "Enough levity." "Just trying to keep morale up," he considered. "We require the ledger, without violating the law, therefore," he sighed, "we will retain Mr. Pantser." A Saul Pantser day is never boring, and usually means trouble substantial enough to justify his rate. Wolfe steepled his fingers. "This culinary cabal will unravel quickly, Archie, but not if we blunder. Proceed with caution." "Always," I said. He gave me the faintest, most reluctant nod. Then he turned his chair toward the orchids, orchid hours approaching, and dismissed me with a flick of his hand. That was Wolfe's version of a ritual closure, and my cue to get moving before the next pot simmered over. The trouble with facts is that they rarely arrive with handshakes and polite introductions. They tend to stumble in sideways, smelling like cigar smoke or cold rain, and expect you to rearrange your whole morning for them. At 9:43 the next morning, the fact in question arrived via Sol Panzer, who materialized in our office doorway with a manila envelope tucked under his arm like a newborn he didn't entirely trust. Saul rarely knocks. He simply appears, noiseless and inevitable, like a tax bill. "Morning," he said, touching the brim of his flat cap. I nodded and put down my notebook. Wolfe lifted his eyes from the yellow legal pad he was pretending not to write on. "Saul," he said, "have you succeeded?" Saul set the envelope on Wolfe's desk. "Photostats," he said. "Good clean ones. No originals were disturbed, I made sure." Saul doesn't boast, but his work rarely needs a warranty. I opened the envelope and slid out the photostats. Pages from Marquette's ledger, copied neatly. columns of coded initials, dollar figures, arrows, marks, and dates. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was a crossword puzzle designed by someone who hated language. Wolfe motioned for me to place the pages on his blotter. He leaned in, breathing through his nose. "Insolent," he murmured. "You talking about the ledger?" I asked. "Or the murderer?" "Both." He scanned the pages with the kind of concentration he usually reserves for orchids or the lunch menu. His forefinger tapped once against the margin. "Archie, your eyes." "Most people have them." "Pfui. You recall the shipment columns in the Circle's inventory?" "Sure. I looked them over yesterday. They were about as coherent as a politician after 3 martinis. "This," Wolfe said, pointing at the page, "uses the same structure, but certain increments, see here, are anomalous. Compare this column with your recollection." I bent in. Wolfe hates bending himself. He considers it a physical indignity. But I leaned over his shoulder and reviewed the figures. The increments, $12 here, $45 there, weren't random. I recognized a pair that matched a shipment Sylvia Brandt had mentioned. "That one," I said, "and that one. They don't match." Wolfe nodded once, pleased. "Someone inflated the values." "Any guess who?" "Not yet." He tapped again. "But we are glimpsing the skeleton beneath the flesh." Saul cleared his throat. "Anything else you need, Mr. Wolfe?" "Not presently," Wolfe said. "Your discretion is, as always, unblemished." Saul tipped his cap and departed, vanishing through the doorway like smoke that had changed careers. When he was gone, Wolfe leaned back and steepled his fingers under his chin. "Archie, you will return to the Circle today. More poking." "I'm good at poking," I said. "It's my hobby." "Do not be glib." "Me? Never." By 6:30 that evening, Manhattan had put on its twilight shawl. I headed back to the Epicurean Circle, where a thin crescent moon hung over the building like someone had misplaced it while setting the scene. The street lamps glowed, delivery trucks rattled in the distance, and the Circle stood shining smugly, as if murders and ration fraud were little inconveniences that happened to other restaurants. Inside, Sylvia Brandt looked like she'd aged a decade overnight. She was closing a ledger of her own, reservations, I guessed, when she saw me. "Mr. Goodwin," she said. "Again." "Habit forming, I know." She gestured toward the service corridor. "If you want to speak privately, we shouldn't stand in the dining room. Staff gossip is vigorous." We moved to the side hallway that led to the loading dock. The fluorescent lights flickered with that institutional hum that sounds like bees trying to unionize. "Sylvia," I said, "I need clarity. You told me Marquette was worried. I need details. You knew him better than you admitted." She bit her lip. "Last night, I saw him arguing with someone." My eyebrows did a little dance. "Now that's interesting. Who?" I didn't see the man's face. It was dark near the loading entrance, but he wore a white jacket. "Chef's coat?" "Possibly." "Dumont?" She hesitated. "He was angry with Louis earlier this week." But Henri isn't careless. If he were planning murder, he wouldn't do it where half the staff could overhear." She shivered. Still, he was upset. They fought about procurement documents. I offered her a long, thoughtful silence. Red herring? Maybe, but good bait always smells legitimate. "Why didn't you tell the police?" "I wasn't sure," she said. "And I didn't want to accuse Henri. He can be vicious, but he's proud. He'd never risk the Circle's reputation." "You sure?" Her eyes darted. "Mostly." That was enough for one evening. I thanked her and made sure she saw me leave, because sometimes you want an audience. When I got back to the brownstone a little after 8:30, the kitchen light was on. That alone wouldn't have bothered me. Fritz treats the kitchen like a monk treats his chapel, but he wasn't cooking. He was standing stiff as a carving fork, staring into the sink. "Fritz," I said. He startled like someone had cracked a cold egg down his spine. "Mr. Archie, please." He gestured with a trembling hand. I came closer. My stomach did a small pirouette. In the stainless steel sink lay a sheet of butcher paper. Not unusual, except for the bloody thumbprint smeared across it, dark red and fresh. "Did you?" "No," Fritz cried. "I did not touch anything. I came to clean the counters and someone left this," I finished. His hands clenched. Again, my kitchen. I didn't tell him to calm down. A man has the right to be furious when someone turns his sanctuary into a crime scene twice in 1 week. "Stay here," I said, and dashed to the office. Wolfe was reading, his face set like wet cement drying into disapproval. I blurted the news. He actually stood, and marched to the kitchen doorway. He stopped at the threshold as if a force field prevented him from entering, which, emotionally speaking, it did. He looked at the butcher paper. His nostrils flared like an angry bull contemplating vegetarianism. "Call Kramer," he said. "On it." By the time Kramer arrived with Pearly Stebbins in tow, the kitchen felt colder than the Circle's freezer. Kramer didn't storm. He didn't snap. He stepped in, took one long look, and muttered, "Hell." Pearly grunted beside him, bulldog face set in suspicion. Wolfe remained rooted in the doorway, arms folded over his massive chest. "Inspector," he said, once again. "We investigate, not intimidate," Kramer replied. His tone wasn't combative, it was tired. He nodded at Fritz. "You didn't touch it?" "No, sir," Fritz whispered. Pearly bagged the butcher paper carefully. Kramer peered at the thumbprint. "We'll check the print against Marquette and everyone in the Circle." "Do so expeditiously," Wolfe said. Kramer glanced at him. "I know this is a mess, Wolfe. I'm not here to railroad anyone. You have my word." That was rare, and it meant Kramer was rattled. I escorted them out. At the door, Kramer paused. "Goodwin, keep your eyes open. This feels wrong." "Only now?" He grunted and trudged off with Pearly. Back in the office, I found Wolfe staring at the ledger photostats as if they were responsible for the thumbprint personally. I took my seat. "Think Dumont did it?" I asked. "The white jacket fits." "So do many jackets," Wolfe said. "Do not leap." "Leaping's half the fun. Restrain yourself." We didn't have to wait long. At 10:28, the phone rang. I grabbed it. "Goodwin," Kramer said. "We ran the print." "And?" "It's not Marquette's." That leaves about 1 million New Yorkers. "It matches Henri Dumont." I sucked in air. "The chef himself. Well, that puts a new garnish on the dish." "Don't get excited," Kramer growled. "It could be planted, or from another time. We don't know the context." "Sure," I said. "Could be a coincidence that a bloody chef print shows up in our sink the day after Marquette dies. Just keep your head on straight, Goodwin." He hung up. I turned to Wolfe. "Chef's print." Wolfe closed his eyes, breathing slow and deep, like a volcano counting to 10. "We have an interloper who performs with props." "Meaning?" "Evidence placed to mislead." "Red herring?" "A herring dipped in deceit," Wolfe said. "We must tread cautiously." His eyes opened. "Tomorrow, Archie, we strike back." He swung his chair toward the orchids, signaling ritual closure. I took the hint. Still, I couldn't help thinking as I headed upstairs, someone was staging culinary theatre with blood, knives, and butcher paper, and we were sitting in the front row. If you ever need proof that Manhattan contains more varieties of heat than hell, just step into the Epicurean Circle's industrial kitchen at 4:30 in the afternoon. The air was thick with steam, garlic, people shouting in French, people swearing in English, and enough stainless steel to blind a man who wasn't wearing his hat low. As I slipped in past a line cook wielding a whisk like a weapon, I caught sight of Henri Dumont at the far counter. He looked like a sculptor chiseling a sauce out of thin air, broad shoulders, precise gestures, and an expression that suggested someone, somewhere, had displeased him simply by breathing. "Dumont," I called. He glanced up, eyes sharp. "You again." He didn't bother masking the disdain. "What do you want now, Goodwin?" "A chat," I said, stepping around a stack of stock pots. "The friendly kind." "The only friendly thing in this kitchen," he replied, "is the butter, and even that is temperamental." He set down his ladle and came toward me, wiping his hands on a towel with the finality of a man preparing to snap a neck. "Say what you must." "All right," I said. "Where were you last night?" He scowled. "Why? So you can invent reasons to accuse me?" "Not inventing anything," I said. "Just collecting." He huffed. "I was at the Ritz, preparing a private dinner." "Alone?" "Of course not. There were staff, sous chefs, assistants." "Names?" "Unnecessary." "That's a convenient name for an assistant." His jaw tightened. "You think I stabbed Marquette, or planted evidence in your chef's kitchen?" "Well, somebody did the planting," I said. "And the thumbprint on that butcher paper is yours, unless you've recently donated thumbs to science." His face darkened. If you imply I entered Wolfe's kitchen, I imply nothing, I said. I ask questions. That's my charm. He stepped in close enough for me to count his eyelashes. I swear, Goodwin, I will send you home with a cleaver sticking out of your hat. At least aim for the side that photographs better, I said. That briefly disrupted his fury. His mouth twitched, either amusement or indigestion, before he regained composure. You are lucky I respect Mr. Wolfe. Otherwise you'd be carving me into the soup of the day. Yeah, I get it. Tell me about Marquette's freezer. He blinked. Freezer? The special compartment he used for inventory checks. Hidden. Locked. Marquette was paranoid, Dumont said. He believed someone was doctoring supplies. He claimed he needed a secure place to hold samples. Samples of what? You tell me, he snapped. He never let anyone look inside. The sous-chef shouted for him, but Dumont ignored it. His eyes were on me like I had just sprinkled poison in the béarnaise. Goodwin, I am not your culprit. If someone wishes to make me appear guilty, they will need more than a thumbprint and your insolent face. He marched off. Even the pots rattled in fear. I made my way down the hall toward Marquette's office, where the locked freezer compartment was reputed to live. A tiny room near the storage corridor housed a pair of industrial freezers humming like bored lions. On the far wall was a smaller door fitted with a padlock the size of my fist. I tested it. No movement. I could have picked it. Saul had taught me years ago. But Wolfe's rules rang in my ears. No tampering. And Kramer would have roasted me alive if I had so much as breathed on the seal. I was about to leave when Franklin Greevy materialized behind me like a salesman smelling commission. Mr. Goodwin, he said smoothly. Still snooping? Still charming, I returned. Open this freezer for me. His eyebrows shot up. Absolutely not. That compartment held Marquette's private inventory. Club property. It stays sealed until our internal board review. That could take weeks. Then you'll have to be patient. I'm not built for patience, I said. It scratches. He offered a cold smile. If you have concerns, take them to the police. They already have a warrant to access the main freezers. And what's in that special one? A mystery, he replied. Lewis adored mysteries. That adoration seems to have been fatal. Good day, Mr. Goodwin. I had half a mind to hit him with the padlock and claim self-defense, but I restrained myself, barely. Outside, dusk was creeping in with a chill wind. I buttoned my coat and headed toward the sidewalk when I felt a presence behind me. Before I turned, a quiet voice said, "You were followed." Saul Pantzer slipped beside me like he had materialized from the air itself. His cap was low, his overcoat neat, his demeanor calm enough to balance a book on. "Who?" I asked. A man in a tan overcoat, slim, 5'10", walks like he's afraid of creaking. "How long?" "From your brownstone to here," Saul said. "Kept his distance, watched you enter, didn't follow inside." "You tail him?" Saul nodded once. "Lost him near 53rd. He's good. Not your average gumshoe." "When did you last see him?" 7 minutes ago, Saul said, turning the corner. He knew he was burned. I considered. "Thanks, Saul." "Keep your back warm," he said, and blended into the street crowd so thoroughly that I might have imagined him. By the time I returned to West 35th Street, the clock read 8:15, late enough that Wolfe would be counting the minutes until dinner. I entered the office to find him staring at the ledger photostats again, lips compressed into a line that could have sliced a tomato. "Good evening," I said. "Bring you any souvenirs?" "Report," he said. I dropped into the red chair and launched in. Dumont's alibi with holes big enough to roast an ox, Greavy's freezer lock, Sylvia's tension, Saul's phantom tail, the whole stew. Wolfe didn't interrupt until the tail. "Describe him." "Tan coat, slim, careful on his feet. Knew Saul was on him." He reached for the photostats again. "Observe this," he said, tapping an entry marked GR. "The shipments. Inflated." "Right," I said. "Greevy Rothman Imports." Wolfe arched an eyebrow. "You assume Greevy." "It fits." "Assumptions are the tools of fools," he said. "Still," he tapped again, "this pattern is egregious." "Enough to kill for?" "Possibly enough to mislead," he said. "We must not accept the thumbprint as proof against Dumont. Red herring?" "A crimson one." I was about to reply when the phone rang. I snagged it. Goodwin, I said. Kramer's voice growled on the other end. The knife is confirmed. The carving set? Yes, a private monogrammed set belonging to the Circle. That clears Fritz. His tone softened. Officially. Well, I said, we always knew Fritz had better things to do than homicide. Don't get smug, Kramer muttered. It clears him of the weapon, not of being a victim of intrusion. Someone still got into that kitchen. We noticed, Kramer sighed. Look, Goodwin, tell Wolfe we're not brushing him aside, but we need results. Fast. He'll be thrilled to hear it, I said. Kramer hung up without a goodbye. His version of affection. Wolfe was watching, eyebrows sharpening like fangs. Inspector Kramer? Yes, knife's theirs. Fritz is cleared, but we're not. No, Wolfe's voice darkened. We are most certainly not. He stood abruptly, well for Wolfe that means slightly faster than the average glacier, and paced a few steps, hands clasped behind him. This chaos is intolerable. Fritz is distraught. My kitchen violated twice. The police flounder. The Circle obfuscates. Enough. Meaning? Archie. He stopped and turned to me. Tomorrow you will fetch every relevant soul. Dumont, Greavy, the assistant manager, ancillary staff, anyone with information or motive. You want them here? I want them here, he said. Under my roof, under my eye. That's a lot of bodies, I said. You planning a buffet? Archie, he said sharply, do not jest when the situation is grave. Just keeping the room warm, I said. Understood, I'll fetch them. Good. His tone shifted, just barely, softer than the usual gravel. Exercise caution. I always do. That, he said, is a lie. I grinned. Well, I try. He moved toward the bell cord. We will dine shortly, but tonight, Archie, your report has been satisfactory. If Wolfe were anyone else, that would have been an affectionate pat on the back. Coming from him, it was practically a declaration of paternal pride. He tugged the cord. Fritz appeared in the doorway like a man answering a sacred summons. Dinner in 10 minutes, Wolfe said. Fritz bowed. I leaned back, watching Wolfe settle into his chair with the dignity of a man preparing to wage war after dessert. And I knew tomorrow would be a circus. There's a particular kind of chill that comes from stainless steel, an institutional cold that creeps under your coat and reminds you that kitchens like the Epicurean circles aren't built for comfort, only for performance. When I pushed through those swinging double doors just after noon, I felt that cold climb my spine, and it wasn't because someone left the refrigerator open. It was the feeling you get when the next act of trouble is about to hit its mark and you're holding the program upside down. Henri Dumont was yelling at a prep cook, something about the soul of an omelette, which apparently the cook had murdered. I didn't wait for applause. Dumont, I said, cutting through the steam and the insults, I need the key to Marquette's private freezer. He spun. Mr. Goodwin, he said, emphasizing my name like it was a condiment he disliked. I told you I do not have it. Then take me to whoever does, I said. That would be Mr. Greavy, he answered, and he will not give you anything. I've noticed he's tight-fisted with anything inconvenient. Dumont glared, but his irritation was interrupted by the manager herself, a different manager, a tall woman named Miss Tardell, who looked like she alphabetized her blood pressure. Mr. Goodwin, the board was informed of your request, she said. They've decided to permit supervised access. Perfect. Let's crack the treasure chest. She led me down the corridor, past crates of produce and a row of gleaming freezers humming in sub-zero unison. At the end was the one I'd had my eye on for days, the padlocked unit Marquette guarded more jealously than his master key. Tardell produced a key from a leather pouch. Understand, she said, that this is strictly controlled. Only Marquette used it, and only for inventory checks. If he was checking inventory, I said, he had very interesting taste. She unlocked the padlock. The latch clicked ominously, as if offended someone dared open it after Marquette's death. The door creaked open and the cold spilled out. I got my tart line ready, but it froze halfway up my throat. Inside the freezer, stacked at the back between cases of lamb and a crate of truffles, lay a woman's body, curled on her side as if she'd lain down to nap and forgot to wake up. Frozen, lips bluish, hair stiff, one hand curled under her chin. Sylvia Brandt. My stomach flipped, rolled, then settled with a grunt. Well, I muttered, I like my crime scenes room temperature. Miss Tardell shrieked, a sound that bounced off the steel and turned my nerves into piano wires. She staggered back, knocking into a stack of canned tomatoes. One fell, rolled across the floor, and clanged against my shoe like punctuation. "Close it," I said sharply. "Now!" We shut the freezer door, sealing the cold and the corpse behind it. Tardell was trembling. "Call the police," she whispered. "Please, call them." "I will," I said. "And then you'll need to tell them everything." Everything what?" "Everything you've been holding back." She blinked, shocked, but I wasn't sticking around for a confession. I headed for the nearest phone. Kramer didn't appreciate being summoned to the same crime scene twice in 2 days, but justice isn't known for its respect for schedules. He arrived with Pearlie Stebbins in tow, casting suspicion in every direction like a lawn sprinkler. "What the hell now, Goodwin?" he demanded before the door even closed behind him. "Sylvia Brandt," I said. "She's in Marquette's private freezer." "What?" Kramer barked. "In the flesh," I said. "Or what's left of it." His jaw set like mortar. "Show me." We went back to the freezer. Kramer cracked open the door. Pearlie braced himself like he expected a zombie. The cold inside wasn't meant for human bodies, and it sharpened the horror. Kramer stared in silence, rare for him, then shut the door gently. "She's been dead only a few hours," he said quietly. "This wasn't part of Marquette's timeline. We've got a second killing." "Someone got nervous," I said. "Too nervous." Kramer rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Goodwin, we're in deep now. This isn't just ration fraud. There's something bigger." "You're telling me?" He stepped aside and pointed at the phone mounted on the wall. "Call Wolfe." "Why me?" "Because he speaks to you," Kramer said bluntly. "And I'm sick of shouting." I admired that moment. Honesty wears well on Kramer, even if he pretends otherwise. I dialed. Wolfe answered on the second ring. "Yes?" "Boss," I said. "We've got trouble. Big trouble." "Articulate," Wolfe replied. "What sort?" "Sylvia Brandt. Dead. Stuffed in Marquette's private freezer behind the loading dock." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. "When?" "Body's fresh. Hours old, not days." Another short pause. "Put Inspector Kramer on." I handed over the receiver. Kramer spoke in clipped sentences, factual, no theatrics. Finally I heard him say, "We're both over our heads if this is bigger than ration fraud." Wolfe's reply was calm as prayer. "Inspector, I appreciate your candor." Kramer hung up and returned the phone to its cradle. "All right, Goodwin. The lab boys are on their way," he lowered his voice. "Stay out of our way, and stay alive." "I'll try to fit it into my schedule," Pearlie growled. "You crack jokes at a time like this?" "Sure," I said. "You should try it sometime. It builds character." Kramer shot Pearlie a look sharp enough to dull a cleaver. "Go secure the perimeter." Pearlie stomped off. While we waited for forensics, I crouched near a small table where Marquette once kept inventory notes. A scattered mess of papers, receipts, and cardboard boxes cluttered the place. Something white peeked out under a fallen crate of capers. I nudged it with my toe and lifted it carefully. A torn scrap of ledger paper. Handwriting. Numbers. A code I recognized from the photostats Saul obtained. Sylvia had been carrying it. Maybe she tore it off to threaten someone. Blackmail? It was plausible. And dangerous. And perfect motive for someone scared enough to kill twice. One of the forensic techs came over. "Step back, sir." "Sure," I said. "Just don't refrigerate me by mistake." While they examined the body, someone whispered nearby. A tech had found residue under Sylvia's fingernails. Saffron. High-grade stuff. Demott's private stash. Lovely. I stepped away and found a quiet corner. Phone time again. Wolfe answered with a grunt. "Clue dump," I said. 1. Sylvia was probably blackmailing someone. 2. She had a piece of Marquette's ledger. 3. She'd been handling rare saffron. "Meaning Dumott," Wolfe said. "Or someone trying to frame him," I replied. "Saffron doesn't commit murder by itself." "You will return home," Wolfe said abruptly. "I'm working." "You will return home," he repeated, voice low and dangerous. "Your hide is not expendable." I blinked. "Well," I said, "glad to know I'm not on the ration list." "Archie?" "Fine," I said. "I'll head back." I hung up. Kramer was near the freezer speaking to Tardell. When he saw me leaving, he didn't bark, threaten, or chase. He just said, "Goodwin, don't get careless." "Me?" I asked. "Never." His sigh was the professional equivalent of a handshake. I took a cab back to the brownstone, the city whizzing past in streaks of neon and shadow. Manhattan was restless tonight. Horns, steam vents, windows glowing like surveillance eyes. I had the feeling someone in a tan overcoat might still be watching. When I got home, Wolfe was in his office, leaning back with his head against the cushion and his eyes half closed, not resting, thinking. "You're early," I said. "I am not," he replied. "You are late." "Same thing." He opened his eyes. "Sylvia?" "Yes, I saw her." "She was vital to the pattern," Wolfe said. "This accelerates matters dangerously." "Tell me about it," I said. "You should have seen the freezer. Looked like she laid down for a nap on a bed of contraband truffles." He winced. Wolfe does not flinch at corpses, but he flinches at disrespect. For life and for the human experience, even if that human happened to be a suspect. I pulled out the torn ledger scrap. "Found this near the body." Wolfe inspected it without touching. "Marquette's code." "She was blackmailing someone," I said, "or trying to." "Likely," Wolfe agreed, "and that someone struck first." He shifted as if preparing to rise, then thought better of it. "Archie, you must stop improvising." "But improvisation is my charm," I said. "You will be cautious," Wolfe said firmly. "Circumspect, obedient." "That last one's tricky." "Archie." All right, I'll play nice." He reached for the bell cord. "We will dine in 15 minutes. Afterward, you will prepare a list of all individuals connected to both victims." "That'll be a long list." "Then begin now." "Yes, sir." As I sat at my desk, shuffling notes, a thought kept nagging. Sylvia had known something dangerous enough to kill twice in 48 hours. And whoever was framing Dumont, planting butcher paper in Fritz's kitchen, and tailing me in a tan coat, they were growing desperate, which meant they were closer than we thought, and ready to strike again. If you ever want to see energy in its purest, rawest form, try watching 3 detectives with 0 patience getting sent out by one man who hasn't broken a sweat since Hoover was sworn in. At 10 minutes past 11, with Wolfe barred upstairs in his orchid rooms, and the brownstone quieter than a cemetery with zoning laws, I stood in the office sorting my notes when Saul Panzer materialized in the doorway like an idea Wolfe had spoken into existence. Saul doesn't knock. He doesn't need to. When a man moves like a well-mannered ghost, doors understand their limitations. "Morning, Archie," he said. "It was morning," I replied. "Now that you're here, it feels like something less restful." Before he answered, another silhouette joined him, taller, slicker, wearing the kind of grin that could charm nurses out of morphine rations. Ori Cather. Behind him came Fred Durkin, solid as a refrigerator with a hat. "You called the cavalry," Ori said, surveying the office like he expected spotlights. "I didn't," I said. "Wolfe did." "Same thing," Fred muttered. "Where is he?" "Upstairs, telling orchids all his secrets." Saul smirked. Ori looked like he wasn't sure whether that was a joke or a metaphor. Fred looked like he hoped it was neither. When Wolfe descended at precisely 11 sharp, he moved with the kind of authority usually reserved for judges or steamrollers. He sat at his desk, steepled his fingers, and regarded the 3 operatives with solemnity. "Gentlemen," he said, "we are faced with an intolerable muddle." Fred nodded like he understood. Ori nodded like he wanted Wolfe to think he did. Saul didn't nod at all, because he genuinely did. Wolfe continued. Mr. Marquette kept a ledger coded with initials and increments. The code was not decorative. It concealed something illicit. Saul shifted forward slightly, which for him was equivalent to a standing ovation. "I've made progress on the cipher," he said. "The entries marked G.R. match shipment records from Greevy Rothman Imports. On paper, it's a distribution firm. In reality, a shell." "A shell," Wolfe echoed. "Implying?" "Ration fraud network. High-end cuts diverted from legitimate channels into under-the-counter luxury supply. Very lucrative." Fred took off his hat and scratched his head. "So somebody was making money twice?" "3 times, Saul corrected. Once selling ration coupons, once mislabeling shipments, and once reselling premium cuts to clubs like the Circle." Ori whistled. "Enough dough to tempt anyone." "Temptation is not proof of guilt," Wolfe said sharply. "We require facts." Saul nodded. "The cipher lines up neatly. Marquette was tracking inflated shipments. Someone at Greevy Rothman was pushing more meat through the Circle than legitimate demand could justify. And Sylvia? I asked. Likely caught onto it, Saul said, or got involved. Or tried to leverage it, Ori suggested, smiling like he'd solved something. She was a looker. I heard she had a lover at the circle. Wolfe's eyelids dropped. Rumours are the broth of imbeciles, but note the possibility. Ori tried to look offended. Failed. And you? Wolfe asked him. What have you learned of the staff and their social orbit? Ori straightened his tie. Talked to 3 waitresses, 2 bartenders, a sommelier with a grudge, and a socialite who organises their charity galas. They all liked Sylvia, but there were whispers she was involved with somebody high-ranking, someone with money, someone who didn't want it known. That fits, I said. Someone who'd kill her rather than be exposed. Fred, who had been quietly absorbing the conversation, finally spoke. I got eyes on Greavy. Followed him last night after he left the circle. All night? I asked. Fred shrugged. Didn't have anything better to do. What did he do? Wolfe asked. He met someone, Fred said. A man in a white coat. I couldn't get a clear look. The place was dark. Old butcher shop on 48th, closed years ago. A white coat, I said. Chef's coat? Could be, Fred said. Could also be a butcher or a dentist. Hard to tell. Another red herring waving its tail. They talked for 5 minutes, Fred added, and then Greavy handed him something small, envelope-sized. Money, Ori said confidently. Could have been recipes for spaghetti, Fred replied with equal confidence. I'm reporting the facts, not the fiction. Wolfe sighed deeply, a sound with the density of disappointment. This is suggestive, not conclusive. I stepped forward. Boss, all 3 reports point at Greavy. The ledger code, the rendezvous, the inflated shipments, the lover rumour. Rumours, Wolfe corrected, are diversions. As for Greavy, he is culpable of something. But murder? Twice? I am not satisfied. That freezer didn't stock itself, I said. Nor did it identify the culprit, Wolfe replied. Archie, you must learn to distinguish between direction and destination. Ori shot me a smug look, which I ignored with the dignity of a man not currently strangling him. Saul placed a single folded paper on Wolfe's desk. One more detail, he said. Sylvia's schedule. Wolfe unfolded it. His eyes moved, then narrowed. She was off duty the night of Marquette's death. Yeah, I said. She claimed she was sick. Ori grinned. Maybe she wasn't sick. Maybe she was meeting someone. Wolfe glared at him. Mr. Cather, the next time you volunteer an unsupported conclusion, I will assign you to tail a taxidermist. Ori's grin died with a squeak. Saul continued, undeterred. The schedule also notes a private meeting between Sylvia and Marquette 2 days ago. What kind of meeting? I asked. Not listed. Convenient. Too convenient, Saul agreed. Just then the phone rang, shrill, impatient, and ready to burst someone's eardrum. I grabbed it. Goodwin speaking, Kramer's voice rumbled. Tell Wolfe the knife is confirmed. We already know, I said. Circle property. Good, saves me breath. Kramer exhaled. Now listen, we also got whispers Marquette was skimming from the top of his own operation, taking cuts off the inflated shipments. I raised my eyebrows. Marquette? The man tracking the scheme? That's the rumour, Kramer said. Pass it along. I did. Wolfe responded with a majestic, unabridged phooey. That is illogical, he said. If Marquette intended to profit, he would not record the discrepancies, nor confront the participants. Unless he wanted leverage, Ori chimed. Wolfe closed his eyes. Mr. Cather, if you speak again without thinking, I shall scream. Saul nodded approvingly. Fred scratched his nose. I covered the receiver. He says phooey. I heard him, Kramer muttered. Look, I've got Stebbins running the butcher shop angle. Tell Wolfe I'll cooperate, grudgingly, because this thing stinks worse than week-old mackerel in August. That's practically affectionate, I said. Don't get used to it, Kramer growled and hung up. I relayed his message. Wolfe surprisingly looked thoughtful instead of triumphant. Inspector Kramer is correct. This is larger than a dispute over supplies, larger than fraud. You thinking conspiracy? I asked. I am thinking, Wolfe said, that someone has used culinary commerce as a cloak, and that cloak is unravelling. He tapped the ledger scrap with a fingertip. Saul, continue your deciphering. Expand your reach to peripheral suppliers. Saul nodded once. On it. Mr. Cather, Ori stood straighter. Stood. Yes, sir? Charm is your only asset. Use it on the Circle's hosting staff, the patrons, anyone who knew Sylvia socially. Extract truth, politely. I always do, Ori said. Wolfe snorted. And you, Mr. Durkin, Wolfe said, turning to Fred. Shadow Greavy, day and night, discreetly. Fred looked offended. I'm always discreet. Then prove it. Fred adjusted his hat. On my way. Saul departed without sound. Ori left like a man entering a ballroom. Fred lumbered out like a dependable earthquake. Once the door closed, Wolfe leaned back and reached for his beer, his second beer. If my math is right, I said, that violates your personal code. Archie, he murmured, your levity is noted. He drank half the glass with a sigh that carried a hint of approval and a heavier hint of concern for the case and, faint though it was, for me. If there's one thing I've learned about human nature while working for Nero Wolfe, it's that nothing brings out a person's true character like the prospect of being summoned to West 35th Street for a private interview. Some people arrive trembling, some arrive indignant, and some try to rehearse innocence like it's a stage monologue. But the most entertaining are the ones who think they can outtalk Wolfe. They're the ones who don't understand gravity. By 3 p.m, I'd wrangled 3 prime exhibits of human inconsistency into Wolfe's schedule. Franklin Greavy, Henri Dumont, and a junior chef named Lyle Rennett, a skinny kid with eyes like nervous punctuation. Corralling all 3 had taken more diplomacy than getting a cab in the rain, but I got it done. Wolfe rewarded me with a glance that meant either approval or indigestion. With Wolfe, both expressions looked similar. At precisely 4, an hour that made Wolfe twitch since it usually belonged to his orchids, he allowed the first interview to begin. Technically, he had violated the sacred schedule. Emotionally, he took it as a personal insult from the universe. Archie, he said as I closed the office door, bring in Mr. Greavy. Greavy swept in like a man auditioning for arrogance. He wore a tailored coat too expensive for someone supposedly devoted to culinary philanthropy, and he carried his outrage like a perfume sample he was desperate for us to sniff. Mr. Wolfe, he said, this is an outrage, a slander. I should not be here. If outrage were butter, I said, you'd melt on the spot. Greavy ignored me. Wolfe didn't. Sit, Wolfe commanded. Greavy sat. He didn't do it happily, but gravity handled that part for him. You were acquainted with both victims, Wolfe said. Your connections were business, social, and administrative. You are a board member of the Epicurean Circle. Your influence is considerable. Your presence here is therefore justified. Justified? Greavy sputtered. My good name is being dragged through mud. Sir, Wolfe said, leaning back, you have no idea how deeply mud can cling. I bit my lip to keep from snickering. Wolfe continued, your timeline for the night Mr. Marquette was killed. Greavy launched into a polished speech, the kind that sounded prepared, rehearsed, and not burdened with too much truth. He claimed he attended a tasting event, met donors, discussed menu updates, and then returned home alone. When pressed for witnesses, he waved vaguely toward club members who surely recall my presence. Surely, Wolfe repeated. And Miss Sylvia Brandt? Wolfe asked. Greavy bristled. A dedicated young woman, efficient, hard-working. And dead, I added. Frozen, in fact. Greavy flinched as though he'd bitten a lemon. I had nothing to do with her death. She was loyal. Interesting choice of word. Your relationship, Wolfe asked. Strictly professional. Another interesting choice. Before we could dig further, Greavy suddenly leapt to his feet. This interrogation is intolerable. I will not tolerate innuendo. Wolves are circling me. Indeed, Wolfe murmured. And what do wolves usually circle? Greavy went pale. He stormed out without waiting for dismissal. That went well, I said. No, Wolfe said. It did not. But it was illuminating. Bring Mr. Dumont. Henri Dumont entered like a storm front, broad, hot, and tired of being asked questions. He refused to sit until Wolfe gestured, and even then he sat begrudgingly, like a man obeying gravity under protest. What do you want from me? He asked. Words? I have given enough words to the police. We want truth, Wolfe said. Dumont's nostrils flared. Marquette was a fool. Is that your truth? Wolfe asked. It's a start, Dumont fumed. He interfered with my kitchen routines. He accused me of waste, of dilution of ingredients. Me. You argued? Wolfe said. Yes, Dumont snapped. About dish integrity, about culinary philosophy, about the soul of cuisine, not money. Never money. Did you threaten him? Dumont stiffened. I told him he should keep his hands off my spice cabinet. Not much of a threat, I said, unless saffron has recently become fatal. His eyes flickered. A small twitch. I noticed. Wolfe noticed too. Where were you during Miss Brandt's final hours? Wolfe asked. In my kitchen, Dumont said too quickly, preparing dinner for the evening service. I did not see her. I did not speak to her. I did not— His voice cracked, not dramatically, but enough to register. You were in the club? Wolfe asked. Yes, he hissed. Of course. Alone? A pause. No, Dumont admitted. Rennet was there. Thank you, Wolfe said. That will be all. When Dumont left, the walls felt less tense, like someone had turned down a flame. He's guilty of something, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied, but not necessarily murder. Fetch Mr. Rennet. Lyle Rennet crept into the office like a man entering a dentist's lair. He sat immediately, hands clasped, eyes darting in several directions at once. Mr. Rennet, Wolfe said, your candour will serve you. Yes, sir. You assisted Mr. Dumont? Yes, sir. And you were present the night Miss Brandt died? Rennet swallowed. Yes, I was prepping poultry. Did you see her? No. Did you hear her? No. Did you interact with Mr. Marquette's inventory storage? Rennet's eyes flicked up, startled. No, I leaned forward. Funny. You said, in front of witnesses, earlier today that Sylvia was strict with freezer inspections. Rennet blinked rapidly. I just meant she always seemed organized. You should not know about those inspections, Wolfe said softly. They occurred in a locked compartment. Rennet froze. His breath hitched, caught, then spilled in a frantic stammer. Someone mentioned, I didn't. He was sinking fast, and Wolfe let him. Who else was in the freezer area? Wolfe asked gently. I don't know. Who told you about Sylvia's inspections? I don't know. Were you in the freezer, Mr. Rennet? Rennet's eyes darted to the door. The kind of dart that means flight is the next instinct. I casually shifted my chair, blocking his only exit route. No running, I said. It scuffs the carpet. He deflated. Maybe once, but only to help Marquette carry something, I swear. What did you carry? Wolfe asked. I don't know. Boxes. Meat. Enough, Wolfe said. The interview ended not with an explosion, but with a quiet crack in Rennet's facade big enough to let in the truth. Once he left, Wolfe exhaled a long, irritated breath. Archie, he said. Yeah? We have our slip. Before I could respond, the phone rang. I grabbed it. Goodwin. Kramer's gravel voice came through hot and irritated. Got something. That saffron trace. Not just Dumont's, it's a special reserve batch, bought privately. And guess who oversees the private supplies at the Circle? Let me guess, I said. Greavy. Give that man a cigar, Kramer snapped, but don't let Wolfe smoke it. He'll be thrilled. Tell him we're pulling threads, Kramer said, and maybe he's right that this isn't a simple fraud case. That's practically flattery, I said. Don't get cute, Kramer muttered and hung up. I relayed the news to Wolfe. He listened without blinking. Then he leaned back, steepling his fingers. Archie, he said, summon them all tomorrow evening. All three? All relevant souls, Greavy, Dumont, Rennet, others if needed. He closed his eyes with satisfaction. We, Wolfe declared, shall disentangle this repast of lies. I grinned. Sounds like you've started smelling the solution. Wolfe opened one eye. Archie, restrain your metaphors. Sure, I said, but I'll keep them warming. He tugged the bell cord, a signal for Fritz to bring beer, victory, or both. Either way, Wolfe was ready, and the trap was nearly set. If there's one sound that never fails to raise the hairs on the back of my neck, it's the shuffle of too many guilty shoes on Wolfe's parquet floor. By 7:30 that evening, the brownstone had all the ambience of a powder keg with a sense of humour. I was in the office rearranging chairs. Wolfe's orders, not because I suddenly wanted a career in interior design, when the doorbell started chiming like a telegraph operator with insomnia. Fritz appeared at the dining room threshold, silent as a saint but twice as judgmental. "They are arriving," he said. He didn't need to clarify the they. I nodded, straightened my tie, and braced myself. Wolfe had decreed the gathering for 8 sharp, which meant the suspects came early to preserve the illusion of dignity, or to pretend they didn't fear the man behind the desk. At 7:44, Franklin Greevy marched in first, wearing his best impression of an innocent man inconvenienced. Behind him slunk Henri Dumont, who carried enough culinary wrath to saute an ox with glare alone. Then came Lyle Rennett, pale, sweating, jittering like a cat waiting for thunder. Rounding out the roster, Inspector Kramer and Pearlie Stebbins, both of whom radiated official disapproval with their usual charm. "Goodwin," Kramer grunted. "Wolfe ready?" "As ready as a man can be when he's skipped orchid time for murderers." Pearlie snorted. Greevy bristled. Rennett twitched. A fine start. At 8 o'clock exactly, because if Wolfe ever violated punctuality the earth would crack, he entered. Not from upstairs, but from the dining room, which was rare enough to make even Kramer shift his cigar. Wolfe crossed the room with all the speed he ever allowed himself, somewhere between Glacier Drift and Royal Procession, and sat behind his desk. He folded his hands over his stomach, surveyed the crowd, and inhaled slowly. "Gentlemen," he said, and though he used the plural generously, the room stilled. "We will begin." No speeches, no greetings, just Wolfe settling in like a judge about to sentence the entire state of New York. "Inspector Kramer," he said, nodding, "your presence is appreciated." Kramer grunted, which in his language meant, "Let's get this over with." Wolfe turned his gaze to the suspects. "You are here because 2 people are dead, Louis Marquette, Sylvia Brandt, both employees of the Epicurean Circle, both entangled in a web of illicit commerce." Greevy shot a hand up. "Mr. Wolfe, this—" "Silence," Wolfe said. Greevy's mouth snapped shut like a walnut cracking. Wolfe gestured to me. I handed him the photostat of Marquette's coded ledger. He held it between thumb and forefinger, as though even touching the thing offended his sensibilities. "This," he said, "is the record of an ambitious scheme. Premium cuts of meat, rationed, valuable, scarce, were smuggled into private channels. Greevy Rothman Imports served as conduit." Greevy sputtered. "That is slander." "Phooey," Wolfe replied. "Your falsified shipments are documented, inflated orders, misdirected deliveries, funds unaccounted for. Whether Mr. Rothman is complicit or merely gullible is a peripheral matter. You, sir, benefited." Kramer crossed his arms. "We've been circling that for 2 days." Wolfe nodded slightly. Marquette discovered the inflation patterns. He confronted someone, perhaps several someones. He intended to expose the racket. Miss Brandt discovered that he had discovered it, and sought advantage. Dumont frowned. Sylvia was not a blackmailer. Wolfe tilted his head. "She possessed a fragment of Marquette's ledger in her pocket when she died. Why?" Rennett swallowed audibly. Greevy fidgeted. Dumont clenched his jaw. Wolfe continued. "Her fingernails contained saffron, not the common variety, a rare strain Mr. Dumont reserves for private dishes overseen by Mr. Greevy." Greevy's eyes bulged. "I know nothing of—" "You know everything of it," Wolfe said. "The Circle's private saffron supply is one of your responsibilities." Dumont slammed his fist on his knee. "Then I am being framed." Wolfe stared at him. "Yes." The room froze. Rennett's breathing turned shallow. "You, Mr. Dumont," Wolfe said calmly, "are guilty of arrogance, bluster, and poor judgment, not murder." Dumont stared, stunned. "The saffron was taken without your knowledge, used to implicate you." Rennett's leg bounced so hard the chair complained. "And now," Wolfe said, "we arrive at the matter of the freezer." He fixed his gaze on Rennett. The kid flinched like he'd been slapped with a frozen trout. "Mr. Rennett," Wolfe said softly, "you claimed ignorance regarding Miss Brandt's freezer inspections." I did." "You lied." Rennett blinked rapidly. No. Wolfe's voice deepened. "Only 3 people had ever entered that compartment. Marquette, Miss Brandt, and the murderer. Your mention of her inspections was an error, a slip, an admission." "I didn't." Wolfe raised a hand. Silence returned. You were there, Wolfe said. You handled boxes with Marquette. You saw the locked compartment. Perhaps you saw what he stored inside. Ledger scraps, notes, evidence. Rennett's face collapsed like wet paper. Wolfe continued, relentless. When Marquette threatened exposure, someone, Greavy I presume, sought only to contain the situation, not kill. He paid you to help, to watch, to keep things under control. Greavy exploded. This is an outrage. You never ordered murder, Wolfe said, turning to him. Your scheme required quiet, not corpses, but you employed a fool, and a fool with fear is combustible. Rennett shook his head violently. No, I didn't mean Marquette. He grabbed me. He said he would report everything. I panicked. It was unraveling fast. Wolfe watched without mercy. And Miss Brant? Wolfe asked. Rennett squeezed his eyes shut. She was going to tell too. She had the ledger paper. She said she would go to the board unless she got a cut. She pushed me. She kept demanding. So you killed her, Wolfe finished. I didn't mean for... She fell. She hit. Then I couldn't leave her there. Greavy staggered to his feet. You imbecile! Pearlie lunged to restrain him. Kramer stepped forward, voice iron. Rennett, you're under arrest. Rennett sobbed once, a small, sharp sound that belonged to a younger soul than his crimes. Kramer cuffed him, while Pearlie held Greavy back. Rennett didn't resist. Guilt tugged his limbs heavier than metal. Wolfe wasn't finished. You planted the knife in Fritz's kitchen, he said. Rennett whimpered. I needed to slow the police. If they suspected your chef, if they thought the brownstone was involved, maybe they'd look elsewhere. Give me time. You used Dumot's saffron, Wolfe said, to frame him. I thought it would work. Everyone thought he hated Marquette. Everyone knew they fought. You moved Marquette's body, Wolfe continued, then used the freezer for Miss Brant. Rennett nodded, broken. She was already when I put her in. Kramer raised a hand. Enough. Rennett crumpled as Pearlie hauled him upright. Greavy, face red with rage, looked like a man grappling with the collapse of a profitable empire. Wolfe ignored him. Kramer turned to Wolfe. Well, he said, you saved us time. Again. It was the closest he'd come to saying thank you without risking his blood pressure. Wolfe inclined his head. Inspector. Pearlie dragged Rennett toward the door. Greavy followed, sputtering legal nonsense. Dumont paused, meeting Wolfe's eyes briefly before exiting, awe battled exhaustion on his face. The office door shut. Silence reclaimed the room. Wolfe exhaled. Archie? Yes, sir? Beer. I grinned. Cold, chilled glass, coming up. As I headed toward the dining room, I thought, rare peace between Wolfe and Kramer. Rare justice, rare calm. A good night's work on West 35th Street. If there's a finer alarm clock than the smell of Fritz Brenner's kitchen reclaiming its dignity, I haven't met it. The next morning arrived with a kind of domestic thunder. Pots clattering, water running, the rhythmic thump of a man determined to erase every molecule of criminal interference from his realm. I came downstairs at 10:02, not because I was awake early out of virtue, but because even my subconscious respects a man disinfecting his soul through stainless steel. Fritz was in rare form. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow, exposing forearms built like Swiss craftsmanship, delicate enough for pastry, strong enough for stern lectures. He was scrubbing the central prep block with the focus of a monk illuminating scripture. Each pass of the brush was a declaration of war against any trespassing thumbprint the universe dared leave behind. I stood at the doorway, leaning against the frame. If you keep polishing like that, Fritz, the wood grain's going to apply for a restraining order. He looked up, startled. He hadn't heard me enter, and then allowed a faint smile. Good morning, Archie. Good morning, or good cleansing ritual, whichever you prefer. He resumed scrubbing, though the tension had eased. Mr. Wolfe wishes the kitchen restored before lunch. That implies lunch is happening, which implies the world is finally turning correctly again. Fritz nodded, solemn. It must. I was about to offer a wisecrack about sanctuaries and sacred ovens when Wolfe appeared in the archway behind me. He doesn't usually grace the kitchen with his presence this early, especially not during orchid hours, but these were extenuating circumstances. The kitchen had been violated twice during the case, and even a man who believes in private ecosystems has to inspect the damage. Wolfe folded his hands behind his back. "Fritz." Fritz straightened immediately. "Yes, sir?" Wolfe inhaled, his nostrils flaring slightly, as though testing the air for any residual insult. Finally he spoke, quiet, measured, deliberate. "This intrusion into your domain was an affront to us all, but to you, most of all. I regret it." Fritz blinked. Apologies from Wolfe are as rare as snow in July, and he treats them with similar weight. "Thank you, sir. Your concern means much." "It is deserved." Wolfe glanced at the spotless counter. "Have you accounted for everything?" "Yes. Nothing is missing." His voice tightened. "But everything will be re-washed." "Good," Wolfe said. That was as emotional as the scene would get. Wolfe turned briskly. "Archie, my office. After you've had breakfast." He departed, leaving Fritz gazing after him with a mixture of pride and gratitude. I stuck around to observe the kitchen's rebirth the way the MoMA might observe a priceless restoration. The pots gleamed, the floor tiles sparkled. The copper rack caught the sunlight with the enthusiasm of a Broadway chorus line. If safety had a geographical address, it was that kitchen at 10:14 a.m., West 35th Street. I took a seat at the small corner table and helped myself to coffee, my first of the day, and well-earned since I had exercised my legs by walking downstairs. Fritz brought me a plate of eggs, bacon, and a slice of his rye bread, toasted to a crisp, that suggested he was reclaiming more than just surfaces. When a man cooks with moral purpose, you taste it. "You will tell Mr. Wolfe," Fritz said, "that lunch will be ready at 1. "I will indeed. Anything different on the menu?" His eyes hardened with resolve. "No. Routine is restored through routine." Spoken like a man who's declared victory, he allowed himself a brief, victorious nod. After finishing breakfast with the appreciation it deserved, I headed to the office. Wolfe was already at his desk, sorting through the morning mail. Sunlight angled through the windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air like they'd been hired to perform. He didn't look up. "Your report." "You want the short version or the illustrated edition?" "The former. I trust your capacity for embellishment remains intact, but I'm not seeking entertainment this morning." I sat, crossed my legs, and launched into it. "Kramer called while you were upstairs. Rennett's confession matches the evidence. The DA is filing charges today. Greavy's facing fraud indictments. Marquette's ledger is officially deemed genuine. Sylvia Brandt's blackmail operation is confirmed by the fragment found on her." Wolfe grunted, a low, satisfied noise. "Appropriate." He set aside the letter he'd been pretending to read. "And Inspector Kramer?" "He wanted me to let you know he appreciates your cooperation." I smirked. He said it like the words were hot coals in his mouth, but they were definitely there. Wolfe snorted. A man cursed with honesty. Then he reached for his beer glass, not full yet, and examined it, turning it slowly between his fingers. I knew the trick. It was contemplation disguised as fidgeting. Wolfe doesn't fidget unless the universe has rewarded him with a completed case. His eyes flicked to me. "Archie." "Yes?" "This matter would have been impossible without your intolerable meddling." The phrasing was classic Wolfe, praise dressed in barbed wire. I grinned. "Your faith overwhelms me." "It shouldn't," he replied. "You're incorrigible." "And effective." He pressed his lips into a line, which is Wolfe's equivalent of a wink. "Occasionally." The phone rang at 11:12. I answered. It was Kramer again. "Goodwin," he said, sounding like a man chewing gravel. "Tell Wolfe the paperwork's complete. We're closing the file on our end. And tell him he wasn't wrong." That was the closest Kramer had ever come to saying thank you, with witnesses in earshot. I relayed the message. Wolfe nodded but didn't smile. He wasn't about to let triumph contaminate his facial features. "Inspector Kramer is an estimable adversary when necessity demands it," he said, "and a tolerable colleague when honesty permits." "You two should take a weekend in the country together," I said. "Bond over ration codes." Wolfe gave me a full scowl for that one, which I considered a personal victory. Fritz knocked gently at 12:59. "Lunch," he announced with reverence. Wolfe rose, slowly, ceremonially, and stepped toward the dining room. I followed at a respectful distance. The table was set with Fritz's consummate precision. The fragrance of braised beef, roasted vegetables, and a mushroom sauce that probably held diplomatic powers filled the room. The kitchen might have been violated, but the sanctuary was restored. We ate in silence for a while. Wolfe's silence is a vote of confidence. He doesn't interrupt meals with conversation unless something is terribly wrong with the world. Today, everything was extremely right. At 1:23, he set down his fork. "You will type my final report this afternoon," he said, "already planned, and file the invoice to the circle board, also planned, and draft a note to Mr. Greavy's attorney reminding him that truth is not malleable to convenience. Would you like me to decorate it with saffron?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "Restrain yourself." I saluted with my water glass. "I promise to be as restrained as you are with the dictionary." After lunch, Wolfe returned to the office while I handled the clerical necessities. Most detectives consider paperwork beneath them. Wolfe considers sloppy paperwork beneath civilization itself. By 3:30, the report was typed, proofed, and placed precisely in the center of his blotter. By 3:40, he'd silently approved it with a nod. Praise from Wolfe comes in small denominations, but it spends like gold. At 4:01, he pressed the bell cord. Fritz appeared, bearing a tray with a single chilled beer. Wolfe accepted it, lifted it slightly in acknowledgement, and dismissed him with a nod. The ritual was complete. I took my usual seat. The case was officially over, the kitchen was clean, the criminals were in custody, and the brownstone had returned to its preferred state, calm, fragrant, and stubbornly immovable. Wolfe settled back, exhaling with the satisfaction of a man whose world had been restored to its intended orbit. He raised the glass. "Let the world," he said, "keep its knives out of my kitchen." I leaned back and said mentally what didn't need saying aloud. Amen to that.